Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out for this press interaction. As you may be aware, I'm in New York for the meetings called on food security. Yesterday, we attended the ministerial meeting on food security, and I'm just coming out of the debate at the UN Security Council on conflict and food security. On the sidelines of these engagements, I've interacted with a whole host of foreign ministers, with Secretary of State Blinken, with the Foreign Minister of Italy, with the Foreign Minister of Turkey. We've also met with UN Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly, and had the opportunity to present Pakistan's point of view a whole host of levels. Just to refer to food security very briefly before I take your questions, Pakistan has a real threat of food insecurity, water insecurity, and energy insecurity that has obviously been exacerbated by recent geopolitical developments. But as you all know, as a result of the COVID pandemic and the climate crisis and economic situations across the world, these issues are far more endemic than that and far more problematic than that. Pakistan is one of the most climate stress countries at the moment. My home province of Sindh is seeing a particularly harsh heat wave. All of Pakistan is currently declared drought hit. We are seeing temperatures in April that we're not used to seeing until the peak heat of the summer. For example, Jacobabad, a city in the northern area of the Sindh province, touched 50 degrees centigrade in the month of April. That is just not a temperature we're used to seeing until the heights of summer. So with the combination of climate stress and the sort of COVID lockdown supply chain issues, we face a serious threat from food security, and in addition to that, we relied heavily on Ukraine for the import of wheat, for the import of fertilizers. As far as the conferences and the meetings that have been held here, the call to action as a result of yesterday's ministerial meetings, it'll help us and other developing countries in addressing the sort of imminent crisis of food security, but for short, medium, and long-term measures, we feel we need a far more comprehensive approach that also focuses on conflict resolution, on dialogue, on diplomacy, and the pursuit of peace, because we believe, Pakistan believes, that if we are distracted by conflict, we won't be able to focus on these existential threats of our time. And this is the case that I made in yesterday's ministerial meeting and today at the UN Security Council. I now give you all the opportunity to ask us some questions.
I will first give President Valeria.
Thank you, Mariam, and thank you so much, Minister, for being here on behalf of ANCA and speaking with us. So my question is on food security. So India suspended the wheat export. Are you concerned about this move, and what are the potential consequences for the region? Also, yesterday you met the Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio, and have you identified together some specific action on food insecurity? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, for your question. As far as India's decision to ban the export of wheat, it is obviously the decision of the Indian government to decide what it wishes to do. Such actions, restrictions actions, protective actions are being discouraged through forums like the multilateral meeting that we held today. Of course, at a time of shortage and at a time of distress, we all must work together to meet the needs of those who can't meet their food security targets. As far as our meeting with the Italian Foreign Minister yesterday, I must say it was very positive. Italian Foreign Minister was extremely impressive. Pakistan and Italy enjoy good relations, and we discussed a whole host of topics, including enhancing trade cooperation between the two countries. Italy has long had a focus on food security. So we will indeed see where we can assist each other on that issue as well.
Al Jazeera. Christine.
So sorry, jammed in the holder there. You've talked about the struggles with food shortages in your own country. Can you talk about what Pakistan is doing to address wheat shortages in particular? It's been reported that Russia offered your former prime minister discounts on wheat. I know you met with Secretary Blinken yesterday. Has the West offered to help on that front as well?
As far as Pakistan's issue with the sort of food shortage, wheat shortage, we are as we have not been able to meet our wheat production targets for a whole host of reasons, Pakistan is looking to procure wheat from wherever it can at the best rates possible. But we believe that this is a short-term remedy, and we need to invest in medium to long-term remedies to address the situation. In my country, if we're facing food security, water insecurity, and energy insecurity issues, we indeed believe that a large part of that, a large contributing factor, are global geopolitical events and our geographical location. But at the same time, we have to take concrete measures to mitigate the effects and impacts of climate change, to preserve the use of water, to move away from flood irrigation and other such outdated techniques, to increase our water infrastructure and incentivize our farmers for domestic production. I actually believe Pakistani farmers can meet not only our domestic needs for wheat, but also could provide that wheat to the world if they were encouraged and supported in the right way, and if governments work to reduce their input costs at a time of high inflation. We could really we could do our own bit to support food security challenges and issues. As far as my interaction with foreign ministers over here, we've really focused on enhancing trade relations. My party and myself and the new unity government believe in that our sort of foreign policy motto is trade over aid, and that is exactly what we're emphasizing on.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I'm not Edie, but she'll come around. Pamela Falk from CBS News. You have spoken, even since you've been here, about the fight against extremism. Mm-hmm. I've spoken with both of your ambassadors about this issue. Can you explain, or at least update us, on where terrorism and Pakistan stands? I know it's a very big question, but it was a big issue this past summer. What do you see now in terms of the scenario?
As far as terrorism and extremism is concerned, this is a consistent and long-term existential threat to all of us. There are obviously immediate concerns that need to be addressed, whether vis-a-vis specific terrorist groups, their increased activity, how and to which way they benefit from the situation in Afghanistan. But as far as our country's long-term approach is concerned, that needs a lot of political ownership and consensus and investment in across the board, where we not only fight the sort of militant component, the kinetic component of this conflict, but we also the ideological component, and we fight the narrative component. Pakistan has a national action plan that is all-encompassing. It combats hate speech, it combats extremism, it combats this thought, this ideology, this poisonous and toxic ideology, and has a way forward to deal with specific groups. Unfortunately, despite having this plan being born of consensus, it hasn't been owned and implemented in the way it should have been by the previous government, and I would certainly emphasize on the new government, of which I am a part, that we fully own the National Action Plan and implement it, walk the walk, walk the walk that we talk about to ensure the safety not only of future generations in Pakistan, but also in the international world.
Thank you so much.
Michelle?
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Michelle Nichols from Reuters.
Yeah.
The previous Pakistan government was a little reluctant to condemn or join a chorus of international governments condemning Putin for his invasion of Ukraine. What is your government's assessment of what Russia has done in Ukraine? And then on a bilateral level, ties between Pakistan and the United States, what challenges do you see in that relationship, and can they be overcome? Thank you.
There's no sea change in Pakistan foreign policy between the previous administration and now. We do, of course, have a more nuanced foreign policy, but as far as this particular issue is concerned, Pakistan is in favor of peace. We, from our own perspective and our own experience, have just seen how after decades of conflict in Afghanistan, how ultimately dialogue and diplomacy were the path to a conclusion. And our case before the world, made it today at the UN Security Council, is just that, is to learn from our experience and deploy the tools of dialogue and diplomacy now to help pursue a peaceful resolution for this conflict. We believe that this and other conflicts around the world serve to exacerbate issues, distract us from existential threats like climate change or even a global pandemic, which we are experiencing at the moment. It's not over. So that is our sort of our primary message. Pakistan, despite having limited resources, has done whatever it can within a humanitarian crisis, within a humanitarian context. We have been leaders in advocating for humanitarian aid in Afghanistan and chipping in our part over there. We've also, despite our limited resources, been providing humanitarian assistance to the people of Ukraine. So while our foreign policy is more nuanced, there's no sea change in our approach. Your second question was more... Oh, okay. So on the bilateral front, we absolutely believe that engagement with everyone and consistent engagement is important, regardless of events and ground realities. And it's only if we have consistent engagements that we can deal with the multitude of problems that we do face. I'm particularly pleased with the way that the engagements that we have had on the sidelines of this of the United Nations have gone so far. I believe Pakistan and the United States have a long history. We have a deep, meaningful relationship that has a people-to-people side, a government-to-government side, a business-to-business side, but there's a lot more potential to unlock over there. And we would like to pivot away from a transactory relationship, a one-point agenda relationship, to a more broad-based relationship with a particular emphasis on trade, with a particular, and I'm particularly pleased with my conversations with Secretary of State Blinken on enhancing trade in the agriculture sector, in the energy sector, in the tech and IT sector, on the U.S. administration's initiatives on women empowerment, empowering women entrepreneurs. And I look forward to working with the U.S. government in these fields to provide opportunities for Pakistani business and for American entrepreneurs, because I believe that they hold the key to unlocking the true potential of our bilateral relationship.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. Susan Tehrani from WION. Do you think it's time that Pakistan reached out for dialogue with India? And also, my second question is, after your meeting with Secretary Clinton, just to follow up on that, what you just mentioned, do you think that Pakistani-U.S. relations has had a reset in a way?
So as far as the question of our relationship with India is concerned, that's particularly complicated by their recent illegal, unilateral measures in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Firstly, the actions of August 5th, 2019, and more recently, the events of May 5th, 2022, have complicated this matter. These unilateral actions not only seek to undermine the internationally recognized disputed status of the region. We see these as an assault not only on the people of Kashmir, but an assault on this institution of the United Nations, as an assault on the UN Security Council and its resolution, as an assault on the Geneva Convention. Not only are they undermining the international disputed status of the region, but there's a concrete effort to undermine and disenfranchise and disempower the Muslim minority, a Muslim majority of the region. They've illegally allowed for non-Kashmiris to buy property and become residents of Kashmir and dilute the organic population. And more recently, to the May 5th so-called Delimitation Commission, the electoral constituencies of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir have been gerrymandered to artificially inflate the non-Muslim minority and convert the Muslim majority into a minority. So such actions make it very difficult for us to hold a dialogue with the country who is implementing a racist policy in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and are not abiding by the resolutions of the United Nations and international norms and international rules-based order. And this, having said that, we are very cognizant of the fact that economic activity, dialogue, diplomacy are ultimately the ways and means for countries to engage with each other and resolve disputes. I just note that particularly at the moment, given this aggressive hostile behavior, the practical space for that happening is very limited. So I think that it is very important for the United States and Pakistan to consistently engage, to honestly engage. And while I wouldn't call it a reset, I would say it is a great opportunity for both sides to think about what is in the benefit of our people, what is in the benefit of the people of America, and what is to the benefit of the people of Pakistan. If we sort of close all doors between the two countries and stop talking to one another, I don't believe that serves the interests of Pakistan, and I don't believe that serves the interests of the people of America. There's definitely a newfound opportunity to enhance engagement, to move beyond a transactional relationship to a more deep and meaningful relationship. And I certainly see the space for that. I certainly see the window for that. And if only we continue to have an honest and meaningful dialogue with one another. Pakistan is very committed to working with the international community. We want to, we are a modern Muslim nation that will be taken seriously on the world stage. We will conduct ourselves in a responsible manner and in an honest manner, engage with everyone, be friends to all and enemies to none, and hope to work towards the mutual benefit of our two countries.
Thank you, Minister. Betül Yürük, Turkish News Agency. We heard some of the ministers at the General Assembly today at the International Migration Review Forum raising concerns about the rise of threat in Afghanistan and as a result, a new wave of migration. As a neighboring country to Afghanistan, how concerning is this for Pakistan? And also, how should the international community engage with the Taliban regime? Thanks.
Thank you so much for your question. And the issue of refugees and migration is a sort of a hot button topic in countries across the world. Particularly given the events in Afghanistan, it is most certainly a fear for us and all neighboring countries. We do fear the possibility of the floodgates opening to massive a refugee crisis like we've seen in the past. As the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan worsens, as the economic situation in Afghanistan worsens, the threat and likelihood of this happening increases. That is why Pakistan is very keen that we don't send a message to the people of Afghanistan yet again that after decades of conflict, that they abandoned by the international community. Pakistan is working particularly hard to assist in the humanitarian crisis and encourage the international community to engage with Afghanistan and engage with the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, to stop a total collapse of the Afghan economy. Because surely if 95% of the people of Afghanistan are under threat of poverty, of going below the poverty line, that not only has consequences for Afghanistan, but it has consequences for Pakistan and indeed the rest of the world, one of those manifestations would be in the form of refugees and migrants.
Can I have a follow-up, please, on
Yes,
Afghanistan? Taliban has rolled back all the sanctions that have been imposed on women in terms of dressing, education, suspending of education. What does your government convey to the Taliban, your position on that?
So the Pakistani government is very clear in private and in public that we convey to the new regime in Afghanistan that they live up to their international commitments. Now, whether that is their international commitment to the right to girls' education and allowing the women's rights in Afghanistan within that context, or it's their international commitment to not allow their soil to be used for terrorist activity, or it's their international commitment to form a more inclusive government setup. In our private conversations and in our public conversations, we do insist on these points. As far as the specific question of women's rights are concerned, the previous government may have had its own approach, but as Foreign Minister of Pakistan, I believe when I emphasize the importance of women empowerment, the importance of women's rights, that is not within some sort of Western imposed construct. We believe that women were given rights by Islam. We believe that the right to education for women is granted because of Islam. The first word in the Quran is Iqra, which means read. It does not say only men read, we are all to read. So Pakistan has had the first female prime minister in the Muslim world. She was elected for the first time. She was elected a second time. And had she not been assassinated, she would have been elected the third time. So when we speak to the people of Afghanistan, or when we speak to the new regime in Afghanistan about women's rights and their obligation to live by their promises to the international community, and we do so not only in light of that, but also because we too believe these are rights of the women and girls in Pakistan and in Afghanistan.
Okay, my question is about that. History tells us that we have been ally of the United States against Russia in Afghanistan. Now, how this new government is trying to overcome that, and secondly, because of the trip to Moscow by the former Prime Minister, there is a wave of disappointment among Europe and America for not, making any condemnation of the Russian invasion. So where does your government stand, and how you are going to make a rapprochement towards that policy?
As far as what you're referring to at the start about being allies in Afghanistan, that is also now very old history. That is the history of the 80s and obviously the Cold War context, and what went on there is now part of history. As far as the former Prime Minister's trip to Russia, I would absolutely defend the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. Pakistan's Prime Minister conducted that trip as part of his foreign policy, and without knowing that no one is psychic. No one has a sixth sense. There's no way we could have possibly known that would have been the time to start, that the current conflict would start. And I believe it is very unfair to punish Pakistan for such an innocent action. Of course, Pakistan is absolutely clear as far as it comes to the principles of the United Nations, as far as it comes to the principles of non-use of force, and all of the principles of the United Nations. And we stand by the principles of the United Nations. We are not part of any conflict. We do not wish to be part of any conflict. In fact, we will continue to emphasize on the importance of peace. We will continue to emphasize on the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to resolve this conflict as soon as possible. And we will certainly not take any sides or take the sides of any aggressor within this context. But Pakistan has its own problems. Pakistan has witnessed decades of conflict in Afghanistan. And as I mentioned in my speech, हम थक गए हैं जंग देख देख के. हमारे बच्चे भी शहीद हुए हैं, हमारे क़यादत शहीद हुए हैं, औरतें मर्द शहीद हो चुके हैं, और हम समझते हैं कि अगर डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के टूल्स इस्तेमाल किए जाते हैं तो हम काफ़ी ऐसे जैसे मसले हैं इनका हल निकाल सकते हैं.
Sir, my follow-up question is, Pakistanis live in America and Europe.
Can you...
Sorry?
This press comments, we really appreciate you here. Frankie Ciardo from TRT World. 2 follow-up questions. One, how would you characterize your relationship with Russia? And number 2 is, how would you characterize your relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin? And number 2, when the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, do you feel that they left a vacuum for terrorism which would endanger your country?
Thank you for your question. Pakistan has a government, has relationships with all states, all governments in the world, and whoever happens to head those governments or head those states, we also have official and diplomatic relations with them. There are no personal relationships between individuals, and they're only relationship between states and governments as far as your Russian question is concerned. As far as Afghanistan, we are concerned that if the humanitarian crisis remains unaddressed, if Afghanistan, 90% of the population of Afghanistan is allowed to slip under the poverty line, if the Afghan economy is allowed to collapse, then things will go from bad to worse. There are concerns about terrorism. The concerns about terrorism are the concerns of all countries in the region and international forces. We are all concerned as to whether the new regime in Afghanistan has the capacity or the will to deal with such terrorist groups. And as we are looking to them to live up to their international obligations, one such obligation was to ensure that no terrorist activity would take place, or their soil would not be used for terrorist activity. So we're hoping that on the one side, the new regime in place over there would do whatever they can to discourage such elements. And on the other side, we are working with the international community to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis developing there, the economic crisis developing there, because we believe that allowing the Afghan people to feel that they've been abandoned once again, allowing them to plummet to the depths of poverty and having an economic catastrophe has no plus sides and only negative sides for everybody involved.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Foreign Minister. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I see so much similarities between the behavior of India in Kashmir and the behavior of Israel in occupied Palestine. The Israelis move their nationals into the occupied West Bank, and the Indians doing the same. The Indians scrapped the special status of Kashmir, as you know, and Israel considered the West Bank as part of Greater Israel. The same thing applies to the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and the former Prime Minister Netanyahu and the current one. So the government of Mr. Imran Khan was committed to see the struggle in both and support them. How do you characterize the policy of your government regarding both the struggle of Kashmiri people and Palestinians? Thank you
There's
very much.
been consensus across the political spectrum in Pakistan, whether it comes to the question of Kashmir or it comes to the question of Palestine. We are unanimous in our support for the people of Kashmir, and we are unanimous in our support to the people of Palestine. The parallels that you see are seen by a lot of people that observe the situation in both. We just spoke at the United Nations Security Council, where we observed that occupied territories such as Palestine and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir face the misery of perpetual conflict, never-ending perpetual conflict that result in many miseries, including hunger. We believe that we must continue to highlight the plight of the people of Kashmir and the people of Palestine. We are still, very recently, the murder, the assassination, whatever word you like to use, of, wearing press identification material and still being shot in the neck, and then the fact that her funeral was also attacked really shook the international community in a way that that many images and events have been unable to shake in modern times. And the plight of the people of Kashmir, more often than not, goes unnoticed, which is why there's an extra burden on the Muslim community to speak out for our brothers and sisters who cannot do so effectively for themselves for one reason or the other.
Thank you, sir. Following up questions on Afghanistan and your comments about Taliban's pledge to the international community not to allow the territory to be used for terrorism. The Taliban recently claimed that they have brokered an accord between Pakistan military and the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan. Could you please elaborate or explain what happened, sir?
इफ्तिखार साहब, आप जहाँ तक TTP के issue है, as far as the Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan is concerned, they have a very troubling history of the way that they've conducted themselves within Pakistan. Their terrorist activity has been the most the significant challenge within the terrorism within terrorism in Pakistan. Pakistan ke the biggest terrorist attacks in Pakistan, the most devastating terrorist attacks in Pakistan, are linked to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Whether it is the APS attack in Peshawar on the school children who were murdered in cold blood, whether it's the attack on my mother, Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, and a whole host of terrorist activity in Pakistan are linked to these groups. Pakistan has, at different times, tried various approaches to deal with terrorism. We go after those who commit terrorism. We pursue those who are involved in terrorism. And we've also had a policy of engagement. And we've seen in the past that the policy of engagement is that, to put it generously, has had limited results. At the moment, there are reports of, as you mentioned, as you stated in your question, and I can't add much more detail to that, other than to say that I'm monitoring the situation and I hope that unlike the past, if there are any dialogues going on right now, that unlike the past, they bear fruit. But it's important to emphasize that we must insist on the new regime in Afghanistan that not only their own soil not be used for terrorist activities, but groups like the TTP that are linked to the TTA and other such terrorist groups are also discouraged by the new regime in Afghanistan from conducting terrorist activity anywhere else.
Yeah. You can have a floor. Yeah. You can ask the question. Yeah.
Natiq Nailoğlu, Azerbaijan, Real TV. Thank you, Foreign Minister. My question is how will the change of government in Pakistan affect Azerbaijan and Pakistan relations? By the way, is an official visit to Azerbaijan on the agenda?
So Pakistan, the people of Pakistan, the people of Azerbaijan enjoy great relations, and I, for one, would be very keen to enhance the relationship between our two countries. I don't think you should expect a change in any way, shape, or form as far as our foreign policy is concerned with Azerbaijan with the change of government. Wad bro, how are you doing?
Sorry I missed most of this, but I hope to make up for this with three quick questions. One,
go ahead.
So what do you think of the reputed nemesis of Pakistani democracy, and especially your party, the PPP? I'm talking about the Pakistani army. What's your new considered opinion on the military establishment, considering your current posting? Number two, what is your opinion about how long your government is going to stay in power, considering the speculation that is ongoing on the ground these days about the longevity of your government? And thirdly, sir, finally, how does it feel to be here in New York, in the same place where your famous grandfather was, and especially made that famous speech here in '71? How does it feel to be back in business?
Thank you, Vijay. How long have you been in New York now?
2 years, sir.
अच्छा, इन सब को बिठा के आप खुद इधर पहुंच गए थे. जहाँ तक आप, as far as your question is concerned, nemesis is not a word I would use. The Pakistani army is not the army of any one political party or any one Pakistani. It is a national institution and belongs to each and every one of us. It has always and consistently been the view of the Pakistan People's Party, it is in our manifesto, that all such institutions should play their constitutional role, their legal role allowed in accordance with the law. It is why we've consistently advocated for them to be apolitical. And the success of the no confidence motion in Pakistan, the first time a democratic constitutional procedure has been used to oust a prime minister, unlike in the past, where only unconstitutional and undemocratic moves have been deployed, is a success, is an achievement of Pakistani democracy. It is an achievement of the Pakistani constitution, and it goes a long way to speak about the progress that has been made by Pakistani institutions. Obviously, nothing happens in a vacuum, and this one event or this one achievement does not wash away the effects of undemocratic steps that have happened in our history. We believe that this is a patience game, and one has to, it's a long grind, and one has to work very hard to consistently pursue democratic principles and regain democratic space and regain space for parliamentary democracy in Pakistan. The challenge for our new government it is challenging because this is the first time in Pakistani history that any government or any party or group of parties have got off the opposition benches and moved to the Treasury benches. And as you're very, very well aware, the methods used by the former Prime Minister at the moment draw parallels with the methods used by the former president of this country. And America has a 200-year-old democracy, but they too are finding it hard for their democracy to cope with post-fact politics. Well, I don't even see it as post-fact anymore. It's like alternate reality politics, and everybody has their own reality in with which they function. So these challenges for a 200-year-old democracy have been difficult, and they will be difficult for a young democracy like Pakistan, which is why it's all the more important for all political parties in the coalition to come together, to take the difficult decisions necessary to lift Pakistan out of the multitude of challenges that we face. We have, on the international front, we have a foreign policy vacuum. On the domestic front, on the economic front, we have an economic catastrophe staring at us in the face, and we have a highly polarized political society. We need to now do the work of government, work together to take the difficult decisions, implement the necessary reforms so we can move forward. And I believe as long as we do that, and as long as we conduct ourselves in that way, then there is very little to challenge the new government and this extensive coalition. But if we fail to do our own job, then we will face many challenges. Does that answer your question? Did I leave everything? Anything? Oh, my grandfather. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's been an honor and a privilege and a completely and utterly unexpected, as you know very well. This is not exactly something that I planned or a path that one had even expected, but events took its own course, and I find myself here as the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. I sat today in the very same chair where my grandfather gave that famous speech following the East Pakistan crisis at the time, and it is indeed a very humbling experience that I got the opportunity to represent Pakistan and pitch Pakistan's case on the very at the same forum. But I'd like to emphasize that that Shri Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Shri Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto made their own mark in history, and we do not imagine that we could fill their shoes. They're towering political personalities and towering figures in history, but we are conducting our own efforts. अपना कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अपना capacity में पाकिस्तान का नुमाइंदगी करे, पाकिस्तान के अवाम का नुमाइंदगी करे, पाकिस्तान का जो नया नस्ल है उनका नुमाइंदगी करे. And when I conduct myself as the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, then I don't only represent the supporters of the Pakistan People's Party. I represent the people of Pakistan at large, be they supporters of the People's Party, be they supporters of Muslim League Nawaz, or indeed be they supporters of Mr. Imran Khan. So thank you for your question, and it's nice to see you.
So,
okay. How do I answer virtual questions?
They will come from. So organizers, can you unmute Tom O'Connor?
You're from Newsweek. Can you hear me?
There's a little bit of an echo for some reason. Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you from everywhere.
I'll go ahead and ask my question then.
Okay, if you mute it from the computer, then maybe it'll come out of the TV. Sorry. Okay, can you try again? Hello? Oh dear. Okay, unmute it from the computer. It's just doing both. Hello? Hello?
Yes. My question is, with Pakistan's new leadership now, one of the things that we've been watching from the United States is how Pakistan will balance its relationship with the United States moving forward, while also at the same time taking into account the United States' growing relationship with India, especially as it relates to the Quad and other regional initiatives. So we're wondering right now, what is Pakistan's main goals in engaging with the Biden administration, knowing that the U.S.'s broader ambitions seem to be aligning with India at the time?
Can you just repeat what you said at the start of your question? Sorry, that bit was a little bit unclear.
Sorry, okay, sure, I could start from the beginning. My question was essentially Pakistan's plans to engage with the United States and its broader goals for this relationship with the Biden administration in the context of the Biden administration's engagement now, growing engagement with India as part of the quadrilateral security dialogue and countering China.
Pakistan is not insecure about our relationship with the United States, and we believe that the world is big enough for both Pakistan and India to exist. So we see that the United States has absolutely got its own relationship with the government of India, with the people of India, but the United States also has its own relationship with Pakistan and the people of Pakistan. And regardless of the trajectory of US-India relations, I believe that there is a lot of potential for Pakistan-US relations, and it is to the benefit of the people of Pakistan and the people of America that both our governments engage, and we look to provide opportunities to both our people to benefit from our relationship. For example, the people of Pakistan, students in Pakistan are very keen to attend US universities. We believe that there's a lot of opportunity in Pakistan, untapped opportunity in Pakistan for American entrepreneurs and the business sector to invest in Pakistan, and vice versa. We also believe that there's a lot of potential for the Pakistani business community to engage in the American market. Our relationship with the United States has been colored too much by the geopolitical conflicts in our region, and particularly by the events and circumstances in Afghanistan. We seek to have a more broad-based relationship that encompasses all the dynamics of our friendship, which would have obviously a political component, a people-to-people component, the defense component, but most importantly, the economic component. As far as the Biden administration is concerned, we look forward to working with the Biden administration, and my initial interactions with Secretary of State Blinken have been extremely encouraging. I'm very happy to note that the United States is ready to engage with Pakistan, and my message to the United States would be that Pakistan is ready to engage with the United States.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Unmuted. Yeah. Or Anwar Iqbal from Dawn. Anybody who can get unmuted, we will have last questions from them.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Welcome to New York, and congratulations on your new assignment. I wanted to come personally, but couldn't because I'm down with COVID.
Oh dear, I hope you get better soon.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad, not I'm coming out of it. So I just noticed a very positive change in approach in Pakistan's foreign policy, that you defended the former Prime Minister as somebody who represented Pakistan, and you said he went to Ukraine and he didn't know how the situation was going to unfold. So was this just one-time change, or are we going to see a new approach by the new government? And also there are reports circulating in Islamabad which say that the new government wants to change the focus from traditional diplomacy to economic diplomacy. Can you please, if it is true, can you please explain what it is?
So as far as the former Prime Minister is concerned, I can't defend his politics, I can't defend his manifesto, I can't defend his government, but in his capacity as Prime Minister and the way he conducted himself in foreign policy, particularly in the context of this Russian trip, I will go as far as to defend the fact that he did not know the Ukraine conflict would start on the very day that he was there. As far as your second point is concerned, absolutely. My approach to the Foreign Office is to move away from our traditional approach to foreign policy. My approach in the Foreign Office is to emphasize the policy of trade over aid. Pakistan is not actively pursuing aid. We're frantically pursuing trade. We believe that there is a lot of untapped potential within Pakistan, and this is an area that hasn't received the attention that it does deserve. And we hope, we've not only sort of made this shift, we've seen a very positive response in our conversations with various countries on this topic, and I'm very keen to work with the federal government and the provincial governments in Pakistan to ensure that when there are governments abroad, when there are business communities abroad that are willing to invest in Pakistan, that they can be connected with the appropriate vehicles, tools and mechanisms to conduct themselves in our very difficult system, and it's early days yet, but I think that hopefully we'll continue to get good news on that front. Was there any part of your question that I have missed? I think I've covered it all.
No, you didn't. You answered.
Thank you. Get well soon, Anwar. I look forward to seeing you at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.